Okay, hi there. I'm Sam Carpenter. I'm here joined with David Van Gilder and Maria Iturbide. And we are doing a backup event because our Facebook Live event did not go live. So we're going to post this for you later. I'm here with the Hoosier Environmental Council, and we're going to share some about what happened in the legislative session. So when we approach this session, in any session, we're going with some main goals. So we're working toward a vision for Indiana that includes an abundance of clean water, natural lands, pure air, and affordable clean energy. As we do that, we're trying to also have overarching goals of minimizing our impacts on climate change, improving and addressing issues around environmental health. And we also want to lift the voices of underrepresented communities in our work in environmental justice and support sustainable, thriving communities. So these are goals that we have in mind as we go into this. Now, this was a interesting year because it was a budget session and a budget year, which means it's a longer session. And toward the end of the session, there was a projected shortfall of $2.2 billion in less revenue than the state anticipated. So suddenly they're looking for ways to cut back on spending. Now, that didn't help much with one of our priorities around funding for land conservation. So, David, tell us a little bit about our kind of why land conservation is important, some of the goals around there.
Sure. We had, as you said, that was an important goal, is to try to increase funding for land conservation. But why? Why would we want to do that? In Indiana, our land conservation sort of revolves around the Harrison Trust, which is some money that's set aside to preserve land. Indiana has some beautiful natural areas which are really important to our economy. We have a strong RV industry, and so people like to buy their RVs and then take them to state parks or other natural areas. So there's a huge economic benefit to recreation. The park fees themselves, the use of recreational equipment that's manufactured in Indiana provides a lot of benefits. And then, for many people, just being outdoors, being healthy, being active, those are strong benefits that HEC is always trying to promote. And so the idea of preserving land and maintaining the land that is preserved, like maintaining nice campgrounds and other facilities in state parks, all of that contributes to our a strong economy and to our healthy Hoosiers.
Yeah, and also this is an issue that's not so partisan as some other issues, right?
Sam, it's universally throughout the United States and in Indiana itself. If you ask people, up to 80% of the people will say, yes, we want more investment in natural areas. And that's no matter what side of any aisle you're on, you want to be, it's bipartisan, it's multi-partisan. Everybody says yes. In fact, in this legislative session, which started with my hair as dark as Maria's, so it was a little stressful. But, I talked to many, many legislators, and to a person, not one of them is going to tell me, no, I'm not really interested in natural lands. They're all totally interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a question of priorities, what it boils down to. And you mentioned the $2.2 billion projected deficit over the next 2 years. And that troubled a lot of our legislators, which resulted in the fact that we really didn't get any of the money that we were hoping for in our budget.
And do you see any progress in this area? And where's the money? Where do we think the money should come from to get the?
Well, we had an idea for a bill this year that was proposed originally 3 years ago, and the idea was to take some small portion of the sales tax that would be derived from the sale of outdoor recreational equipment and dedicate it to conservation funding. A lot of states have done that. Missouri's done it, Texas has done it, Georgia's done it, Virginia has done it. And that got a little bit of traction early on before sort of the dire economic projections happened. But we didn't get a bill introduced this year, but we're going to keep trying. We're going to keep working on that over the next year, the next biennial budget year. So otherwise, the money comes from an appropriation from state legislature. So they have to say, we would like the Benjamin Harrison Trust to receive X number of dollars. And we wanted $15 million this year, which is kind of level with what we've gotten in the last budget. And there just simply was no money. And so they allocated nothing to that.
Okay. Well, we're going to keep trying as their hair gets grayer. Hopefully, it doesn't
Yeah.
start falling out. Also,
As long
I
as
think
have
my
it.
hair just keeps on getting grayer and grayer. So Maria's doing great, though. So
My
Maria,
first session.
so Maria, tell us a little bit about water and kind of some of the things, goals that Hoosier Environmental Council has around water, and some things you noticed in the session this time.
Well, Sam, I think it was a very good session regarding water resources. We saw the first steps towards a comprehensive plan of doing some protecting our water resources. We have SB4, which was Water Matters, which is the first step towards the permitting of water transfer from point A to point B. So even though this bill didn't consider groundwater, it's a first step. So I think it's a very good way to start water resources protection. It also asks for environmental impact assessment in the point of withdrawal. So I think it's a very good way to start this regional planning that we are talking about.
And tell me about that groundwater inclusion. Why is that important?
It is important because as water, we know that water flows and it's a part of a cycle. So water, underground water is the main point where we can see and extract water from our houses to provide with drinking water. So water, underground water is the main point in the water cycle. And if we only focus on surface water, we are lacking of that vision of a comprehensive way to do some planning in our water resources.
Right. So it's interesting that this bill around the water transfers, which was largely credited to the design and investment in the LEAP district, where they wanted to transfer up to 100 million gallons per day from the Wabash over to near the Lebanon area. That brought a lot of attention to water during this legislative session. So SB4 really was probably a direct result.
And I think that another good thing about this bill, it started with 30 million of gallons per day. And it was within the discussion, Senator Deary allowed it to reduce it to 10 million of gallons per day. So that decrease is good. Of course.
Good. And then also since then, Governor Braun has issued an executive order to develop a water task force to look at water more comprehensively. So Hoosier Environmental Council sees that as a really positive step, because we do need to be looking at our water more comprehensively, and we're going to be advocating strongly for water quality to be part of those important issues. So another area that we focused on during this legislative session, and I encourage folks to visit our Bill Watch page. If you go to hecweb.org, our website, and click on the Bill Watch, you can see more information. But another area that we focused on is energy. And so we really need affordable, clean energy. There's a lot of pressures around energy use. There's a lot of growing demand because of the electrification of our homes, of our transportation, and now data centers. Everybody's talking about data centers and the growth of AI and how that's contributing to our energy needs as well as water. So as a state, we need to be thinking about low cost, effective ways to manage our energy, to provide energy that's also not going to pollute, cause pollution for our climate, for our water, for our air. And there are solutions to that. One solution that we saw, which was positive, was, let me look at the bill number, 422. It started in the Senate with the chair of the Utilities, Senator Cook. It's around advanced transmission technology. And that's just simply a way to get more out of our grid. I read something recently, it was kind of interesting. Like, would you build a 30-lane highway so that you never have to tap the brakes? Our grid is built to manage those peak moments, those most congested moments. So really, we only use about half of it. But we do need to have it available to us when those extreme situations, like Winter Storm Elliott, back in around Christmas of 2022, you need to be able to manage those. So there's different ways to manage it. One is to build new transmissions, which is very costly and very expensive. New generations, very costly. You can also get more out of your existing grid, and that's what this Senate Bill 422 was about, is using low-cost technology improvements to get more out of the grid. David, what are some other things you saw in the conservation area that stood out?
There were a couple of things. One is there was a bill that that didn't pass. It was called HB 1234, trying to establish agricultural easements to make it easier for farmers and other owners of ag land to put some protections on their land and in the form of easements, conservation easements, and to be able to pass that land down to the next generation. So that one got a lot of traction, but it got held up because it had some fiscal impacts, and that was a problem this time around. We'll see that back again. Other land kinds of things, there were a couple of bills, one in the Senate and one in the House, to try to preserve some portion of our state forests as mature growth or wild areas, one of the bills called it. And that, again, the Republican version of that bill got some traction, but it, again, had a little bit of fiscal impact, which stopped it in its tracks. But it's, again, a bipartisan effort to say, look, we've got these natural resources that all of us depend on and all of us enjoy, and wouldn't it be nice to make sure we were preserving at least some portion of them? So that was another one that was in there. A lot of the bills sort of are conservation bills, but they also spill over into water bills. One was called Low Head Dams, which was a SB 477. It makes it easier to remove these so-called low head dams, which are, you might see them in rivers and streams. It's just, they aren't holding back the water so much as they're just letting it spill over down a 2, 3, 6 foot embankment called a weir. And those are dangerous. Those are hugely dangerous for people, boaters, but they're also vastly destructive to the ecology of the stream. So the legislator wisely allowed that bill to go forward so that it's easier to remove those, which were built, decades ago for flour mills and small hydroelectric and reasons that are no longer necessary anymore.
I think another bill that fits into the conservation is the SB 211
211,
Clean
right,
Water Indiana program that authorizes funding
right.
to extract exotic invasive species. So I think that's good. That will allow domestic and native plant species to progress in our state.
Right.
It's interesting. One of the things that I noticed is just the level of interest and the number of people that are getting active on supporting native plants and removing invasives. That's something that people are doing in their own yards. There's a lot you can do just by planting natives and reducing the amount of fertilizer you need to put in the yard, and reducing the amount that you need to mow, retaining soil, retaining nutrients, and providing habitat through these native plants and pollinator plants. And that's something it's great to see that the legislator picked up on that. Interesting about the HB 1234 that Representative Culp introduced, that does protect farmland and keep it in families or permanently protects farmland. But it also does come with a lot of management practices that are going to reduce erosion. They're going to reduce nutrient runoff from fields. So there's a lot of best management practices that accompany those types of easements very frequently, right?
Yeah, exactly. I want to talk about one other
Mhm.
intersection between conservation and water, and then I'm going to ask you an energy question.
No,
Sam, so be
please.
prepared, okay?
I'm ready.
So, uh, Maria mentioned the Clean Water Indiana Fund, which allows for removal of invasive species on a local level. The other one that really impacts both water quality and land use is a bill that passed that allows IDEM, or actually requires IDEM, to inspect concentrated feeding operations, CFOs. That's SB 193, and we track that, and we testified all through the bill's passage through the legislature, and basically it makes IDEM more conscious of these concentrated feeding operations and make sure that they get inspected at least once every 5 years to be in compliance with their permit, which is intended to prevent animal waste from getting into our waterways.
Mhm.
So here's my energy question.
Well, hold on. Let me comment on that. So,
Okay.
do we think that CFOs, KFOs need to be inspected more than every 5 years? Yes, we do. But we also try to make progress where we can. So there were some good things in this bill. We saw it as a step forward. And sometimes, even though we want everything all at once, we make progress where we can. I think 193 is a good example of that.
It is, and I think it came to a good place for now, but we'll see. I mean, if it turns out to be problems that are uncovered, especially with older CFOs that are getting inspected more often, then we might go back to the legislature and ask for even more inspections to make sure that happens.
Yeah.
Are you ready for
All
my
right,
energy
hit me
question?
with it.
All right, so Sam, I noticed, and all of our viewers probably noticed, there seem to be 3, 4, 5 bills this year having to do with small modular nuclear reactors. What's that all about?
Okay. So the small modular nuclear SMRs reactors is really that. So it's the idea is you're going to modularize the parts for reactors, make them smaller, and be able to build them in factories, and then ship those parts to a location, assemble them, so you can dramatically reduce the cost. There's benefits in scale and manufacturing in terms of reducing costs of anything. So we want to use that manufacturing process to bring the cost of nuclear energy down. And that's the concept behind it. Unfortunately, nuclear energy is not a new energy. They were talking about small modular reactors. Actually, I think I read somewhere recently 50 years ago. And so there are no small modular nuclear reactors in operation in the United States. There's only 3 in the world, or 2 in the world. China, Russia, and Japan, I think, has a test one. So the problem is it's just very expensive. And the history with cost overruns all over the world around nuclear, Marble Hill in Indiana, it's proven. The cost overrun concept is proven. The cost of SMRs going down is not proven. And so that's the challenge with it. There's other. So what is it all about? We have this new increased load growth, which is another name for energy demand, coming into the grid. And for decades, we've been flat, or we've been growing 1% in terms of our energy demands because of efficiency and other measures. But we're trying to use an old model of centralized power pushed out to meet this growing load, and that's why they want to use nuclear. But the thing is so we've got an energy grid that's 100 years old, a model that's been going for 100 years, and there's new things that we can do instead. We can use localized batteries. We can use localized solar. We can use, obviously, renewables, wind and energy are the cheapest and form of new energy and the quickest way to bring new energy onto the grid, as well as pairing that with batteries. That solves a lot of our problems with that intermittency and that sort of thing. But there's a huge push for SMRs. Unfortunately, there's another bill, 425, called energy, this production zones, or I forget the exact name of the bill, but it enables these SMRs to be built without local approval through zoning ordinances on sites that currently are used for energy production. Initially, wind and solar was part of that bill, and we supported reform for siting of renewables because there's a lot of challenges with this. The current system is broken. But actually, the renewables were pulled out of that, so now we can site a coal plant, we can site a gas-fired plant, we can site new gas line transmission, we can site an SMR without local approval on these existing energy production zones, which includes mining lands, but we can't site a solar field or wind.
So you mean local zoning isn't going to apply to these fossil fuel based and or SMR based energy sources, but local zoning will still apply generally as it has been applied, opposing local solar and wind projects.
That's correct, on sites that have this current energy production association. And so we talk about all of the above, but all is not equal. There are better forms, and just because we need lots of different sources of energy, there aren't good. They're not all equal. And the thing about SMRs is we're talking 10, 15 years before those actually come into production.
We actually have been talking about it each year, 10 years coming down the pipe for 50 years.
Right.
And they still aren't here.
They still aren't here.
All right.
And yeah. And we do have sources available now that we need to utilize. So,
all right. Hey, I'm gonna jump in on another.
Please.
Another bill that
because I could keep talking about this forever.
Yeah, that we were watching. We were not watching. It was basically what they call the agency bill. It was HB 1616. Department of Natural Resources and other agencies always propose like a little cleanup bill, and usually it's pretty non-controversial. And likewise, this year it was non-controversial. But a really good thing happened at the very end of the session. Senator Yoder inserted in that bill a call for an interim study committee that would look at the economic benefits of recreation and outdoor conservation uses. And that's a really good thing because part of what drives some of the decision makers in the state is economic benefit. And there have been lots of nationwide studies, but there hasn't been an Indiana-specific study. So Senator Yoder had this great idea to insert that into 1616. It did pass, her amendment passed. And so HEC is part of a coalition that just this last week sent a letter to the Senate and House leadership, who are the decision makers. Please appoint an interim study committee for recreational economic benefits. So that's a good thing, and that's hopefully will happen, and we'll see some results from that down the way.
Yeah, good. Maria, how about we had a lot of discussion about stormwater and construction sites. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened there?
Well, yeah, it was a tough bill. I think we did a lot of research. We provided with data, with science-based information regarding how this bill was going to negatively affect our water resources. Unfortunately, that bill passed. And that bill, what does, it leaves, first of all, it removes the local authority to have their own laws and their ordinances regarding stormwater management. So, which means that now at the state level, they all have to comply with the construction stormwater permitting, and at local level they cannot provide any more stringent laws than this state level, and the state level doesn't have to be more stringent than the federal level. So
So it seems to me like the local level is cut off for construction sites 1 acre or less.
Yes,
And
that
the
is
general permit that you talked about only applies for the larger construction sites.
that is right. So we have that gap. That it can provide, it can produce a lot of pollution, of course, and it removes that local authority. And we know that Indiana, the state of Indiana, is very different. We have 92 counties, so it is very sad to remove that local authority, of course. Yeah. And
We
so-
don't want to stand in the way of locals being able to protect their water resources and stand in the way of clean water at the local level. And unfortunately, that's what this bill does,
Yeah.
HB 1037. And on the discussion on the floor in the House and the Senate, there wasn't a lot of clarity on the fact that they just completely wiped out regulation for sites less than an acre. And so that's something that we think we need to revisit, because I actually have a site under construction a couple doors up from me, and man, the amount of sediment,
Take
mud
pictures.
that's going
Yeah,
up.
take
that
pictures
site.
saying we need that.
Yeah, we need
I've
that.
got pictures.
All right.
So, at any rate, yes, that's going on.
And the issue is really what you just mentioned, the sediment.
Mhm.
I mean, when a construction site is cleared of all the vegetation and the rains come as they inevitably do, dirt washes off. And not only is it in the streets and that bothers people, the real important bit is that there's just a lot of sediment which carries pollution, gets into lower waterways, and that's really the issue. And that's what local people, whether you're in the karst area around Bloomington or whether you're up in heavy clay in my neck of the woods around Fort Wayne, or you're in the sandy areas where Maria lives, those are different conditions. They require different rules, and the local people, the stormwater managers, have fashioned their local rules for those geographic areas, and the legislature has sort of wiped that out,
Yeah.
which is a big problem, I think.
So we've got a couple questions that were submitted ahead of time, so I'm going to share some of those. If we have any other questions, Annie, you can let us know. But there was one specifically about 1037. Is it going to actually interfere with local ordinances like Indianapolis-Marion County Zoning Ordinance Section 741-309? We have a very informed viewer. And 744-205.
Well, I think the short answer is probably not, because the general stormwater permit that IDEM continues to issue for larger construction sites also applies to sites that are in common. So, like a residential development in a where there's 50 houses being built at the same time, that general permit will still issue there. And the fact that each individual plot is less than 1 acre, but it's all part of a common scheme, means that it'll still be covered. It's where the individual sites, whether it's a corner gas station or a new house out in the middle of nowhere, those are the ones that are now uncovered. But I think that's not going to, the 1037 won't affect the subdivision code.
Yeah. Here's a question around, from my perspective, the folks leading the SMR solution for additional energy needed with proposed data centers popping up totally ignore solar as part of the solution. What are the next steps for solar in Indiana? So, a few things that we can think about for solar is one is getting siting reform for solar and wind so that they can be, part of the solution on a larger scale. And so we need to have community input. The communities need to benefit in local communities and rural communities where these large scale places are put. And we also need to recognize the need for this additional energy and this clean energy. So we need to balance community input, community benefits, and the overall state benefits on issues of siting for solar. So figuring out good solutions for siting is one thing that needs to be done. Community solar is a larger scale than your rooftop solar, but it's local on the grid in the areas where it's needed most. It's closer to the demand, and there's a lot of benefits in cost, There's benefits, and depending on where it's placed and how it's placed, on the distribution grid and needs for upgrades to the distribution grid. Did you know? Have you ever looked at your electric bill and you see the distribution grid? You know, I think you can be involved with this for years and years and still not understand your electric bill. But part of the main cost increases are related to that distribution grid. And so, but if you put in sources of energy and storage strategically within that grid, you can minimize the costs associated with additional upgrades. So solar is a great way to do that with batteries in communities, on rooftops, that sort of thing. So that's another step that we're part of a coalition for community solar in Indiana.
Sam, isn't it true that no matter how you look at it, solar and wind, those forms of renewable energy are currently the least costly new energy forms that could be added to the grid?
They absolutely are. And as we do things like, you know, what 422 did, enhance our transmission capabilities, that brings more capability, more benefits for low-cost energy from solar and wind to be utilized. What happens currently is we have these big bottlenecks on the grid, and some of that energy, those electrons, just get dumped into the ground. So if we have batteries that we can put in place, then it's stored and it's used when it's needed. But yeah, those are, and also management. So there wasn't bills on this, but there are. The IURC is looking at distributed energy resources and how to manage our load through things like smart thermostats, through timing of your charging of your EVs, through home batteries and putting those onto the grid. One thing I'm excited about is two-way charging, bidirectional charging with electric vehicles in your home. If you have an electric vehicle that can go put energy into your home, then you can charge it up when the costs are low, and then when the costs are higher, you can actually draw from your electric vehicle
Use it
to
as a
power your
battery.
home.
Right.
They have these huge batteries that can power your home for like 2 days.
Yeah. Well, I've got an EV at home, but I'm not yet able to charge my lights yet. But I'm going to try to do that.
Well, the Leaf is one of the ones. Do you have a Leaf?
No, I haven't. I did have a Leaf,
Okay.
but now I have a.
The Leaf is one of the ones that actually has a bidirectional charging put into it.
Very cool. So I want to ask one more question about the whole SMR, because the questioner had that. Isn't it true now that with the passage of these SMR bills that it's possible for a utility, for our large user, to do the studies and do all the beginning work to build a small nuclear reactor and then never do it and charge it to us?
Yeah, so this bill, 1007 and 425, 424, there was like all these SMR bills. They allowed for the planning and development costs to be charged to ratepayers. Now, what are the costs to plan and develop and design a SMR? It can be $200, $300 million. And then if that project doesn't go forward, then still you're going to have that expense as a ratepayer. So that's why we're so concerned about that. Plus, these projects have ballooned in cost. There was an SMR that was going to be built. I think it was in Idaho National Labs. It went from like $4 billion to $9 billion and eventually got canceled altogether. There are states, I think South Carolina, where people are paying for 15 years for a failed nuclear project. So there's big consequences. And as you know, as our legislators, as our governor talks about reducing energy costs, and we all feel it on our bills, the cost increase of energy, and there's going to be more coming. As Chairman Soliday likes to say, we got to make investments in our grid, and there's going to be additional expenses. We need to realize that there are things that we can do to minimize those expenses. SMRs is not one of them. So we really need to think smart and make good decisions about that now. Did you have another question for me,
Well,
David?
not, I don't have a question for you, but there's something that we
Okay.
meant to say that we should say is
Mhm.
there was a bill that was very positive that passed this year. It's SB 459 about water cybersecurity.
Mm.
So the idea being water intake plants that prepare drinking water for us, as well as the treatment plants that clean it up after we've used it, are subject to being hacked. And so this bill actually requires municipal utilities to pay attention to that, to take measures to prevent anybody messing with their systems, which is vital for our drinking water and for our wastewater.
Yeah, and we learned about a rural water facility being hacked by Russian hackers, right?
I think they were Russian, but we don't know.
Well, that's what I was told.
Okay.
So, yeah. Bree, do you have anything else you want to weigh in
Well,
here?
maybe yes, in water quality, as we know, water quality is so important, as important as water quantity. And this year we had 4 bills PFAS related.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, and PFAS is something that, as you know, it's a forever chemical that unfortunately we have in our state. There were 4 bills, none of them moved forward. We had one SB 538 PFAS chemical that wanted to have propose a meaning of PFAS chemicals, and that's
right.
yeah,
Definition.
and that's
They were
a
going to restrict the
definition.
meaning.
Yes.
Yeah, definition,
So
yeah.
that was a silly bill that didn't move forward, and we're happy for that bill. And also in the House there were 3 bills PFAS related that we thought it was a good. The 3 of them were good bills regarding PFAS. One was regarding the registry of discharge PFAS into our waters. I think that's something that we need to promote for next year as well. And also regarding water safety standards and biosolid testing. So coming to PFAS, we know it's a forever chemical and we need to pay attention to this.
Yeah, there's a lot happening with PFAS, and we have worked with Purdue Institute for a Sustainable Future. They just released a report, and we're going to put that in the notes when we share this on Facebook. We'll put a link to that report. And yeah, so there's a lot of work to be done, and we're pleased to see the second time around the bad PFAS bill kind of restricting the definition that's been pushed by the chemical industry did not move forward. We had a fun question here. Let me read it for you. Where's my questions? What happened to my questions? Oh, here it is. Based on your goals for 2025 legislation, what was your biggest defeat? What would you have done differently? So the thing that I would say about this is HB 1007 was the bill that was a big push for SMRs. It was a delay on the closure of coal. Coal is our most expensive, dirtiest form of energy, and their attempts to delay the closure of coal, planned closures of coal-fired plants. We have a lot of problems related to coal. So it creates, coal combustion residual coal ash that is currently lined. It is being stored in unlined pits in contact with our groundwater. We have more of that than any state in the nation. These coal plants are expensive to operate. They're old, they're outdated. They need to be retired, and that's why the utilities have made that decision to retire them. 1007 has some language in there that's going to make it harder for them to do that. And then the other thing combined, and it also enables new investment in natural gas infrastructure. So we do need natural gas in our current energy mix, and we support transitioning from coal to natural gas in some cases. But to expand the use of natural gas, I think is a line too far, because that also requires new pipeline, new transmission. And the combination of 1007, 425, which enables new pipeline transmission, is concerning, because what we don't want to do, and then there's another bill that called natural gas as green energy, green and clean energy. Which actually, the methane that leaks from the use of natural gas is 28 times more potent as a climate pollution than carbon dioxide. So there's real concerns around that. So I think this push towards this it's a cling to fossil fuels. When there are so many better solutions that are going to benefit our economy, they're going to benefit, Hoosier households in terms of their rates that they pay, that are going to benefit our climate, our air, our health. Like, there's so many good things about it, and yet there are entrenched interests that want to cling to fossil fuels. So, unfortunately, they made some progress in this legislative session, and I see that as one of the biggest setbacks.
Well, you're our boss, so whatever you say is the biggest setback is correct. But from my perspective, as the conservation funding, it's just really sad that we can't decide in this state to focus on preserving land, making sure our state parks are in good shape for our users, for Hoosiers. It's a pretty simple thing, and it doesn't require high-tech anything. So that's my situation. I know Maria probably is going to tell us that water quality
1037
is the
yes.
worst, right? But I do want to say there's two really good things about that. One is we had a lot of very heartfelt, interesting, data-driven, science-driven discussions with legislators who don't normally look to HEC for technical guidance or who typically don't vote with us. But we had those good discussions, and we got, I'm going to say, 9 state senators to vote against 1037, which is I think a success. And the other issue is sometimes good ideas don't get through the legislative process, but one in particular set of good ideas about food quality and studying how food is derived in the state of Indiana and how it's distributed to people is actually in one of Governor Braun's executive orders. And that's a good thing, because one of the reasons that Hoosiers suffer greater rates of obesity and ill health is because of the food we eat. And so the governor has rightly recognized that, and there were some ideas that were in legislation that have now entered into his executive order number 58. So I think that's a good thing too.
Well, that's right, and I think another positive thing, we did see a number of good bills get through. We've referred to a number of them. Again, if you visit our Bill Watch page, you'll see more. And the other thing that I say is, this is my 3rd legislative session with Hoosier Environmental Council. I saw a lot more bills introduced by members of our supermajority caucus than I have other sessions. Now, that didn't mean that they made it. In some cases, the bills didn't even, or like around PFAS, didn't even receive a hearing. But it's good to see more bipartisan support for these bills that are really going to provide some protection and support for our environment. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up unless there's anything else.
I got one more thing.
Oh, I knew you would.
So this is for the sort of the sports nerds out there, the people who like stats. We started the session with over 1,600 bills, 1,600 and some odd bills introduced. When we looked at that in the beginning of January, we reduced the bills that we were going to focus on, that is HEC was going to focus on, to about 115 bills. And by the time the legislative session wound down a couple weeks ago, we were looking hard at 17 bills that were left over. 7 of them we're going to consider wins, 6 we're going to consider losses, and 4 we're sort of neutral on. So we had a winning season.
Oh, hey, I'll take it.
Okay, good.
Okay, well, thank you. And I want to encourage folks, they can sign up for our e-news to stay informed about what's going on. We also have a number of call to actions on pieces of legislation. There's a lot going on federally, obviously, that we need to be responsive to, and invite people to support our work. We rely on contributions from individuals to do this work. So thank you, David and Maria and Anna, for helping us out today. And thanks everybody for joining us.